Welcome to another edition of Hall of Fame Live. We are so glad to have you all with us to spend some time with a Hall of Famer so many of you know and love. He's a former world number one, a U.S. Open champion, a Davis Cup champion, and so much more. And of course, a member of the class of 2017, Andy Roddick. It is so good to see you.
It's great to be seen, and it's good to see you. How's everything going?
Hanging here in Texas. I know you have your home in Texas. You're actually in North Carolina, in Charlotte right now. How have you been the past several months? How's the family?
We're good. Apparently, I become very productive when you take away golf and tennis. Our kids are. I was convinced going into the shutdown that 2.5 and 4.5 were going to be tough ages, and I actually now think they're about the best ages to have because they don't really know any different. Their day to day is kind of the same. So I've talked to some friends who have, kids who actually know what independence looks like, and that's been more of a struggle. So we are as good as we can be.
For sure. Well, there's been a silver lining for Andy Roddick fans. They got to see a good amount of you on Tennis Channel. You had a couple months stint on Tennis Channel Live. Did you enjoy talking a little more tennis than usual?
It was a lot of fun, but the kind of everything had to align for me to sound quasi-intelligent when talking about tennis. If it would have been a current event where I'm having to know current players and everything, I'm not involved in tennis much day to day now. So the fact that it was kind of all looking in the rear view made it a lot easier and frankly made it possible. But I really enjoyed it. It's like getting together with tennis is my first love, so to kind of walk through that again and have it kind of be a part of the day-to-day experience again was really nice for me.
The logical follow-up here is, where will there be more of this, where that came from?
Well, the one thing I was pretty adamant about and still am when I retired is that I wanted to control my geography a lot more than I had for the first part of my life. And so, listen, if precedent has been set where us talking to each other from various rooms in our house is deemed acceptable after this, then I think there will probably be more of it. If it's, I always said I don't know that I'm going to travel 30 weeks a year to sit in a box, and kind of talk about it. But I certainly enjoy it when I do it. It's just a matter of logistics for me.
I think tennis fans will take you however they can get you. And speaking of fans, if you are joining us live today, you know the drill. Now is the time to go ahead and leave your questions for Andy in the comment section. We are going to get to as many of those as we can today. And Andy, this is normally a big week for the team on the ground in Newport. As such, I feel like it's appropriate to start us off today with a little Hall of Fame rapid fire. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. Who was your toughest Hall of Fame opponent? Somebody already in.
Andre was really tough for me. Kind of what I did fed right into what he did really well. He wasn't scared of my pace on my serve, and so he beat me up a couple of times before I was, I guess, quote unquote, tour ready.
Who was your Hall of Fame or is your Hall of Fame idol or inspiration?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. I kind of grew up in the most spoiled generation of U.S. tennis fandom. Where every week someone different from America was watching or winning. Chrissy Everett, Martina were huge inspirations, and then the whole generation of Andre, Pete, Chang, Courier. I got to watch the tail end of McEnroe and my good friend Jimmy Connors also. So those are all my idols. The coolest thing is going from idolizing them when you're a kid and then all of a sudden having a relationship with most of them on some level now. That's always it's still like really weird for me.
Well, on that note, if you could invite 3 Hall of Famers to a Hall of Fame dinner, who would they be?
Ooh, that's a good question. The first one out of my went into my mind was Arthur Ashe. Obviously, I never got the chance to meet Arthur, and so that would be great. I've always made it a habit to try to hit balls with people I really admired, and I obviously never got that chance. So Arthur would certainly be one. Rod Laver would probably be another. I actually got to know him at a couple of events leading up to the induction in 2017. And if there's a more humble person who has accomplished as much as Rod Laver, I haven't met that person yet. And so that would be amazing. I know Serena's not in the Hall of Fame yet, but it's a matter of time. But I'd like to throw her in the mix too, just to see how that shaped up.
Fair enough. All right. Thoughts when you heard your fellow 2017 inductee Kim Clijsters was making a comeback?
Listen, all I've heard from when Kim retired to when she would play exhibitions, and I know she had to fill in the final as a tournament director one time and ended up winning. By all accounts, from the eyeball test, people said she could absolutely still play. It's not surprising. I think it's pretty inspirational. I hate that we aren't getting a chance to actually see it play out. But to me, it was like I was pumped, but it also kind of made sense. If I tried now, it'd be a storyline, and I can't play anymore. But by all accounts, she can still hit them pretty good.
I know you've had a couple of tours through the museum. Which item or artifact made you geek out the most?
Gosh, that's tough. The thing they did with Roger, I don't know if it's still up or not, but the kind of interactive thing they did with Roger, I thought was really cool. I didn't miss playing him up close, so that was like it was something that was very cool, but it was also the thing of nightmares for me. Basically all of the old rackets and stuff from I remember watching a certain match. Let's say it's like a 85 Wimbledon where Becker wins for the first time, and having that racket, I'm like I'm starting to put the pieces together. There was an artifact then from the '89 French Open when Chang won, and that was the kind of the first tournament where I would actually sit still for an entire match and watch them. So I remember the match he played against Lendl there. So artifacts from matches that I remember watching as a kid were really cool for me to see.
Finally, Andy, your best induction day memory.
Oh gosh, I was actually really sick the night before, so I woke up and I was like trying to get through it. So I woke up and I felt fine and getting there, and I don't know if I was nervous or what it was, but honestly, the best part of it was, you retire and everyone from your kind of tennis orbit and existence goes into their next thing, whatever that is, whether it's family or some people went back to tour and we're in management positions or whatever it might be. So just getting everyone, having an excuse to get everyone back together. I like beers the night before, and playing ping pong at a bar with everyone who kind of helped you along the way. With those kind of simple moments were probably my favorite.
Speaking of induction weekend, as I alluded to just a couple of minutes ago, we'd normally be just a couple of days away. We'd be in the middle of the Hall of Fame Open, which is such a great week for fans and Hall of Famers to come together in Newport to support the Hall of Fame's mission. It's just a little different this year. We've launched a special initiative where fans can put their names and photos in the Hall of Fame as part of an interactive exhibit. I have already participated. I'm confident it's the closest I will get to any Hall of Fame in my lifetime. But the hope is that we can all come together virtually in 2020. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to tennisfame.com/yourname. Andy, from your perspective as a Hall of Famer, as a tennis history lover, why does the Hall of Fame's work matter for you, for fans?
Well, it's making our memories real again. You go there and to be able to see things and touch things. And for me, I felt when I would walk through, especially leading into the induction, I felt like this big because you're going in and you're just walking through the absolute icons of our sport. And for me, I said actually in my speech, I was a fan way before I was a player of any level. So it is super important to protect the history of our game. To be able to show young kids, this is what came before you. This is how it happened. This is, what you see now was born through all of these other people and what they did for the sport. So obviously tough times all around, and we do need to protect our story and our history.
On the topic of history, I think the month of August is going to be one for the books in the tennis world, at least. Do you see the proposed schedule happening as planned?
Well, it's a pretty aggressive schedule. I've heard plans from the U.S. Open. I know they released it. I hope that happens. If it doesn't, it's certainly by no fault of anyone at the USTA. They've been incredibly diligent about making sure that best practices are available for safety. I've read where some players say they cannot play without 4 or 5 people with them. I would say that I'm pretty sure we did it all through juniors. Our moms would take us to tennis court and say, roll them out. The court dimensions would be the same. I don't like that as a reason not to hold the event. It's a logistical giant trying to pull off a tournament of that scale. I hope it happens. I'm proud of the way the USTA has formulated a plan and has put safety first, which hasn't been the case with some of the events that we've seen So I hope it happens. It seems, even past the U.S. Opens, it seems like a very ambitious schedule.
Tennis is an individual sport. Players are looking out for themselves and wanting to perform their best. How do you think tennis players in general will handle the bubble concept?
I don't know, differently, and that's one of the things that's such a challenge with this entire virus is kind of people's appetite for risk, and responsibility. So I don't know. You would hope that as soon as you maybe win or lose a match, you go home and act responsibly. I think that should be the case. I would hope that there are protocols in place that once you're out of the tournament, you're not actually allowed back on site. And by virtue of that, if you get through the first 3-4 days, you've largely minimized the people that are actually around and allowed on site. So I would be stressed because I'm not directly in control of everyone else's actions, but hopefully you'd like to think that people would be responsible and look out for each other.
This made me wonder, were there any contemporaries of yours who were really good rule followers who would have done really well in this situation?
You know what? I think our generation probably more like if you compare like the Rodgers and the Raffas to like the McEnroes and Connors and Agassiz. So I think we might actually be trending the right way as far as rule followers, but who knows? From what I've heard from Kyrgios, I don't think he's in a rush to go anywhere. So he would probably be the #1 rule breaker. Maybe not as far as a pandemic goes, but just in general.
All right, we have a fan question here from Jacob Svart on Instagram. He asks, since seeing the cute video of 7-year-old Sonia Kennan saying how she would be able to return your serve, have you actually served to the 2020 Australian Open champion? I'm guessing quarantine put a kink in any of these potential plans.
Well, I think that I might have served to her that day when she was 7. I don't remember it. Obviously, retrospect is tougher when she's 7 and there's a long line
Sure.
of you're serving to that day. I haven't actually met her in person. I'm an admirer. I like her grit. If we could kind of pre-package competitiveness and a little bit of healthy stress, I think is good for a tennis player. It shows that you care. There's certainly a lot of qualities with Kennan that I wish we could just automatically impose on a lot of other American up-and-coming players.
All right, let's rewind a little bit. Looking back on your tennis career from a junior on up, knowing what you know now, is there any bit of advice you wish you had been given then?
The one regret I have is not pacing myself a little bit more. If I got hurt, I would always, and they said you're out for 6 weeks, I'd always try to get back in 3 or 4 weeks. If you look at kind of the precedent that Roger and Rafa have set, where they're going to play only when ready and completely healthy, and really try to kind of, peak at certain times, regardless of what's going around in the rest of the tennis world. They kind of put on their blinders and decide what's best for them. I think I was probably a little too insecure with my own ability to kind of sit on the sidelines and wait and try to time it well. But I think I probably would have been able to play a little bit longer had I not. And this is kind of counterintuitive to what you would want to tell a young player. But if I had paced myself with training a little bit more and not, felt like I had to go 110% every day, I wish I would have been a little bit smarter about scheduling.
Interesting. All right, shifting gears. Some fans may have heard the story about you sneaking into the players' lounge as a 9-year-old at the U.S. Open. When I was reading about that, the first time I had ever heard that, I was just feeling like I needed some more detail. How exactly does that happen?
Yeah, so very carefully. My mom took me to the U.S. Open for my 9th birthday. I think there was. I kind of, she said, meet me back here at X time, and I kind of just couldn't sit still. So she actually wanted to watch some tennis. So obviously a different time, but I kind of was just circling around, and I saw that I knew where the players' lounge was because it was the old building, like where the indoor center is now, and players would walk out and you could see them. So I kind of just walked around the building, and people were coming and going through the trash entrance very easily without credentials. And so I said, listen, I'll take a shot. No one's gonna really. And at 9, I think I realized that I wasn't going to get in a lot of trouble. I would just play dumb if I got caught. Say, I got lost. I'm alone. And I kind of just walked. And then they didn't even have walls. There were like these flimsy little dividers. So I just went underneath one of those, and there's free video games. So it was a big score. Saw my favorite players. I knew enough to like be very quiet and not go ask players for anything because I knew that that would kind of end with me being escorted away. But I kind of got away with it. I never got caught and just kind of cruised out when I needed to.
That's a solid story. And I think the moral there is things have come a long way in terms of security.
That is not what would be what would happen these days at the U.S. Open. That's definitely not possible now.
Love it. All right, another fan question from Cliff Insta on Instagram. Can you ask Andy about his loss to Serena in a match they played when they were both 10 years old? Does she still bring this up?
Yeah, I mean, every time that we talk, she brings it up. There was a story where she sent me a link where she had done something and she had to list her top 5 victories of all time. And sandwiched in between one of her many, many, many slams was a victory over me. And her logic was because she beat me when we were 9 or 10 years old, she has an indirect win over most of the men's champions, depending on how far you want to take the rule of indirect wins. And so that was kind of her springboard to having an indirect win over Roger, Rafa, Andre, Pete, and the list goes on and on. So in her mind, that's a very important victory.
Sounds very logical to me. I like her reasoning. Solid.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Andy, you went from junior number 1 to number 1 in the world in the span of just a few years. The process of moving toward being a household name, being sort of this pop culture icon, that's different for everyone. You seem to handle it very well from the outside looking in, but how tough was that?
I don't think it was that tough. I was certainly aware. I think in this day and age with phones everywhere and all of your mistakes made and you say something that you shouldn't. I think trouble is easier to find nowadays. But I was always pretty responsible. I certainly didn't, stay home. But if I went out, I made sure that I wasn't driving. I made sure that in my mind, it was just a matter of being pretty organized. The attention, you could take it or leave it. I think I knew that the tennis was always my North Star. I never really compromised training. I never got in trouble where I would take a day off because I had made a bad decision the night before or the week before. So it wasn't too hard. It is. I think the hardest thing was being in the shadow of giants in American tennis. That part is tough. Where American tennis fandom, rightly so, and I was part of that, kind of feel entitled to a winner or 4 every year, and that was tough. But
sure.
Listen, any problem that I had with it was outweighed by what I was able to enjoy from that process tenfold.
I have to talk about the serve motion. It's iconic. The routine is iconic at this point. What was the origin story? Was it a coach? Was it you?
Well, the story was, so I was always like a little guy growing up, and then I kind of grew, and so all of a sudden, even the way I played was a little bit defensive at times but I was tiny, and so that's kind of just the way I learned to play. And then all of a sudden, I grew a little bit. I was practicing with Marty Fish one day when we were in high school, and as I normally would in high school, Marty was drumming me in practice. So I got kind of heated and kind of pissed off, and took this little half motion and just swung as hard as I could, and the serve went in. And then I did it again the next point, and the serve went in, and it went pretty hard, and so that was it. It wasn't really intentional. It wasn't really like we were getting super creative or innovative. I was upset, and it was a bit of a tantrum, and that's how I got my service motion.
There you go. Speaking of Marty, does he get some bragging rights after his big golf win the other day?
Oh gosh, he's had bragging rights for pretty much any sport outside of tennis for a very long time, and even now in tennis, I can barely win games off of him. He's just really good at golf. Like he hits the ball like a pro. He can hit it both ways, high. It's just his hand-eye coordination is as good as I've seen. But he does stuff like that. He went and took batting practice with the Mets one time and hit like 10 balls out. He does it lefty. Plays tennis righty. He's just like that guy. Like if you went into a pool hall, you feel like he'd run the table and then walk away. He's probably good at darts. I don't know.
Amazing. All right. Fan question about the serve from Dasmit Man on Twitter. Today's big servers are almost always exclusively big guys. There aren't many average height guys hitting 150-mile-per-hour bombs like you. Is there a reason for this beyond lower launch angle?
I don't know. I've never actually thought. I get asked questions about serving big and why and how, and I honestly just don't know much about it. It would make sense as far as the way the serve's bouncing, but as far as the big guys hitting the big serves, I know equipment matters. So what you gain with Luxel on strings on ground strokes and being able to kind of swing full out on returns and stuff, since that has kind of taken place, and this is purely baseless with as far as evidence goes, it seems like serve speeds have kind of stayed very level throughout the equipment, while everything else has gone crazy. With guys hitting the ball hard and running, and people have become better athletes. It seemed like serving has kind of stayed the same or even regressed a little bit. And the only major change that I've seen is with the strings. So I'm not sure if that affects serve speeds at all.
Fan question that came in live asking for your thoughts on one of this year's inductees, another big server in Goran Ivanisevic.
Well, listen, we don't in tennis, we don't have a home team. We need a reason to watch individuals. And as far as watching someone for a personality, Goran was about as good as it was. I remember I played him one time at Wimbledon in 2001 in the third round, and he came in as a wild card, kind of got through his first 2 rounds. And so, I think I was considered the favorite at that point. Little did I know him, hitting 50 aces past me in the span of 3 hours was going to end in him holding, the unlikeliest of titles at that point in his career, when he probably should have won it, once or twice earlier in his career. It was not fun to see that day, but it was fun to watch, 10 days later when he was in the final doing it. But, he was certainly entertaining. And, I kind of like people where you don't really have to wonder what they think very often. And you certainly you don't have to wonder what Goran thinks very often.
All right, we got several fan questions about various aspects of the 2009 Wimbledon final. It was such an unforgettable moment and match for tennis fans watching. Was there a point where you were able to appreciate it as sort of a moment in history versus attaching it to the result?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was pretty aware of all of it. When you walk out and you realize that at that point Roger has 14 slam titles, and you walk out and you see Sampras is there, and he's never around tennis, so the only reason he's there is because Roger and Pete have 14 slam titles. You certainly feel the weight of the moment. And there was the royal box that day as far as the caliber of former players that were there to witness that moment for Roger. I said I think I was the guy who was trying to shoot Bambi that day. It kind of ruined everyone's trip. I can only imagine what Pete's response would have been had he flown all that way and then had to do it again at the U.S. Open. But listen, it was. I say if you're lucky as a tennis player, you have that moment where you go to any Starbucks and people want to know about it. That's my Starbucks match, minus the Open's not, finishing one is not, Davis Cup's not. It's that match that people kind of choose to remember. But it created a relationship with tennis fans that for the next 4 years of my career was completely different than it was going into that match, which maybe I was polarizing going into that match, and then afterwards I don't feel like I was to most tennis fans anymore. So in kind of the grand scheme of things, there were definitely a lot of positives that came out of it as well.
Another fan question that came in live: do you have a favorite Wimbledon memory?
Gosh, that's tough. I have so many Wimbledon memories. That match being one of them. The first time I played on center court, I remember I played Thomas Johansson, who had won a couple tournaments coming in, and I ended up playing him in a semifinal later also. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I lost in juniors, the year before, and all of a sudden you're walking out and you're actually on center court. I think everyone was making fun of me because I wore my badge onto the court and I wore my badge off the court as if they were going to take me off the court or something. So, you don't really get to, and I think the weekend before during practice week, I snuck in and just to take a look at center court because I had never actually seen it. And then to be kind of walking out there 3 days later was a pretty special experience.
Very cool. You've talked about the experience that you had with Andre Agassi when you were a teenager, and he sort of just let you fire away with questions. Do you have that relationship with any of the younger guys on tour? Any people asking you for coaching requests?
I just, you know, I think the best thing I can be is available, but I'm also, it was different with Andre just because we were actually on tour together. So there was proximity and you know, there was, you know, I think at certain points in his career, you know, Isner will check in, or, you know, the guys that I was on tour with would check in, but I've been gone for a minute now, you know, so a lot of the young guys, I don't really have much of a relationship. I try to make it known that I'm happy to pick up a phone, and you know, if there's anything that you'd be curious to see if I know, then I'd be happy to tell you. I think probably more importantly is the stuff that I know I don't know, and what you know, what regrets would be. You know, there's a lesson learned there, but my phone doesn't ring too often.
Speaking of the passage of time, this is the 20th anniversary year of the Andy Roddick Foundation, I believe, if I'm getting that correct, which is wild to think of. How special is that anniversary for you, and sort of how has your involvement and your role in your foundation changed your perspective over the years?
Yeah, well, it's made perspective over the years. You know, people, you know, we talked about the '09 Wimbledon final, and you know, everyone, you know, I think expected me to be sad for a long time, and I felt like that was a pretty selfish emotion when going back and seeing what the kids in our programs go through daily. A tennis match doesn't really hold much water in comparison, but it is crazy that 20 years. I think our first event was we set up a net in a parking lot and did a clinic, and you know, I don't know what we raised, and I don't know, you know, what the depth was of the people we helped, and you know, now we serve 7,000 kids a day in the Central Texas area, and it's a full-time operation and a proper board, and we won you know, best summer learning program in the country last year. So it's become a very real thing. You know, what it was 20 years ago, I don't think we would have imagined that it would have kind of morphed into what it's become. And it's probably in spite of me as opposed to because of me. I mean, our staff and our board, we put in tireless hours. You know, I certainly don't know how to put together an out of school time educational program, but I'll try to ask questions until we find that person. You know, so it's definitely changed over time, and it's been one of the gifts. I always say I feel like I've probably taken more out of it personally than any kid we've helped.
I know obviously the foundation takes up your time, you have your business dealings as well, but what has been your favorite part of retirement over the past 8 years? Your favorite thing that you were able to do that maybe you weren't before?
Yeah, I still haven't gotten to the point where we travel too much. I mean, obviously kids is just insane, but in all the best ways. My immediate thing that I enjoyed and continue to enjoy is like a long glass of wine when I'm not in a rush. I feel like for 12 years of my life, I was in and out of dinners in less than an hour. And it was, you know, we wanted to sit down, and it was very clinical because you had to go either get sleep or get treatment, or everything felt like it was kind of always a little bit rushed. And so to be able to kind of take a beat and, you know, have conversational dinners and long dinners has been a very simple thing, but it's been, I certainly don't miss rushing.
As far as the business side of things go, I know there's real estate, there's bourbon, there are cookies and tips treats. Is the strategy sort of invest in what you love?
I think that's right. But I think the thing is, can we scale it? Is it something that I can add value to? You know, Tips Treats is an Austin-based company. Tiff and Leon are amazing. So that relationship's developed over time. They were wanting to expand into North Carolina, where my wife is from. So it seemed like a happy marriage. You know, and again, it's the one thing my dad told me, that's the smartest thing I think he ever told me, was surround yourself with smart people and ask a lot of questions. And, you know, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So frankly, the luckiest thing that I've had in business is access to people that are much smarter than I am.
As a Texan and a Tips Treats enthusiast myself, I feel compelled to ask you perhaps the most important question today. What's your favorite cookie flavor?
It's a snickerdoodle for sure. But but the Tifwich is the one, and that's been one thing that we've been missing a bit during during COVID. But the doodle's the one.
Love it. All right, we're wrapping up here, Andy. Another fan question that came in: who's your current favorite player to watch? Non-COVID was the qualifier there.
Yeah, Andreescu I think is awesome to watch. She's, I emoted a little bit. I was, you didn't really have to wonder what I was thinking too often on the court, and so I probably gravitate towards someone who, you see her play and you feel like she makes it a little bit of a street fight. She goes crazy. She gets pumped up. She's super athletic. What she does well is like very obvious, even if you don't know a ton about tennis. And I feel like she draws you into her matches as well. So I have a lot of fun watching her.
Good stuff. Well, we are going to wrap things up today, Andy, with a very high-tech segment we're calling Erotic Rewind. I'm going to hold up some photos printed on my handy-dandy home printer, and you tell me what was going through your mind at that moment. Are we ready?
I hope.
All right. Here is the moment you became a Grand Slam champion.
Yeah, I always say I either won a Grand Slam or I saw a ghost. I'm not sure which one it was, but that's not a very good looking cry face though. That's a some people have nice cry face. That's not the good cry face.
Good stuff. All right, next one. This is Saturday Night Live 2003. It was a big year, 2003.
That was actually a funny skit. So I was so bad. This probably I shouldn't tell a story, but I was so bad, and they do like an actual run through of Saturday Night Live where you do the full rehearsal and it's shot like the actual show. And I was so bad in that I went back to my dressing room, and I had a friend there, and he said, I left after the first half of rehearsal. I went down to the corner store. You need to have at least 2 or 3 beers before you go back on. So I was working off a buzz by the time that clip came around.
Amazing. All right, next one, Davis Cup 2007, a legendary team there.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was something where I felt like we were knocking on the door for a long time. I think we had developed friendships and relationships that probably went way past our common goal, but it still was our common goal to win that. So I didn't play college tennis like James and the Bryans and like they had experienced. So that was kind of my only venture in it. And Davis Cup's one of the most special parts of my career. I tend to think it won't ever really be the same as it was, which is unfortunate. But that was just such a fun time in Portland.
All right, perhaps my favorite picture of the day. This is Got Milk model Andy, 2003 as well. What was going through your mind at that moment?
Yeah, I mean, we've all done things that we regret. And the craziest thing about that picture is that possibly the most iconic pop culture photographer of all time shot the Got Milk ad. It was Annie Leibovitz shot that. Yes.
No way.
I shot with her before, and so she shot it. And I don't think she'd be mad to say it probably wasn't the most inspirational shoot she's ever done in her life. So by virtue of that, we were done pretty quickly, which was good.
I think maybe it was as good as a Got Milk ad could be. I think we'll go with that.
Yeah, that's probably still generous, but I appreciate you.
All right, last one. This is the moment where people are applauding you. You're walking up to give that speech that I believe you sort of just freehand wrote all in one sitting. Is that the story?
Yeah, I sat down, I think it was the evening before, and took 10 minutes. And I think the worst thing you can do with a speech is write out verbatim what you're going to say. So I basically just wrote a bunch of like lead-ins to thoughts, and at least wanted to put them in order so I didn't get lost. And if I did get lost, I'd be able to go to the next thought, and hopefully no one would notice. But I was, the only thing that I was really intentional about was I didn't want to talk about matches. I didn't really care about reliving specific events or anything like that. I kind of wanted to just express the journey of being a fan and the fact that you don't really get there without people that are selfless to help you. And I think at that point, we had our son Hank, and Brooke was pregnant with our daughter Stevie, and so even looking into the eyes of coaches and agents and everyone that helps you and people that take care of you when you're 17 and on the road, knowing that they had families that they were leaving just to help me, I think it even was an even stronger emotion that day. So I could have cared less talking about any of my matches. I wanted to talk about my heroes, and I wanted to talk about the people that helped.
Finally, Andy, we've been lucky enough to have some kids join us for our Hall of Fame Lives. If you can finish by maybe leaving us with your best bit of tennis advice, that would be great.
Yeah, and it's not even just tennis advice. I would say control what is controllable, especially right now. There's certainly no shortage of reasons to be anxious or worried or uneasy. But the one that we can control, we tell our kids, like, you can control your attitude and how you deal with something that maybe isn't ideal. And I think that's a big thing with tennis too, because you hear a lot of, and I hear parents that are like, oh, we got this draw, it was windy, it was sunny, it was all these things, but those are things that are, kind of for everyone, but how you react and your attitude and kind of what you put in on a daily basis, those are all decisions. And so I would say make good decisions.
Andy, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. We really so appreciate your time today.
I enjoyed it, and stay safe.
And thanks to all of you who joined us live. Don't forget to go to tennisfame.com/yourname to join the dedicated fans supporting our sport right now when we need it the most. And as always, make sure to keep an eye on our social channels for details on our next Hall of Fame Live. We'll see you then.